Well, cool, Vic. So what do you think? You want to get back to Vic Feazell's timeline?
I'd like to do a quick recap of where we were. We were talking about April of 1985. April 11th of 85 was when the special Lucas grand jury convened. That's
Right.
when they all showed up at the courthouse and got sworn in. Matter of fact, we have a picture somewhere of them being sworn in. I might have been the one that swore them in. I think there's a picture of me standing at a podium or a lectern, swearing in somebody. I think it's the grand jurors. I think they're all raising their hands. Yeah.
I've actually seen the photo. I'll post it up.
Yeah, let's find out and post it.
I've got it.
So, and I've said before that April of 1985 was a very busy month. It lasted 6 months. It really did. And when we get down through talking about this timeline, oh wow, our listeners will see how April lasted 6 months. So April 11th, it convenes. April the 12th, that's when we got Lucas away from Georgetown.
Right.
Judge Allen had signed the bench warrant. Maddox, Attorney General Maddox, and I had requested it. And we went down on the 12th and got Henry away from the task force. On April the 14th, 2 days later, that's when Hugh Ainsworth's article came out, the Dallas Times Herald article. Go back and listen to our interview with Hugh. And also, Jonathan, you did some video.
Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel. Yeah.
Yeah.
We took some excerpt of him talking about JFK and his time with Ted Bundy.
You did a good job on those videos, Jonathan. They're
entertaining.
They're very entertaining. Good
They're
at it.
short, and they're short. So if you only have 5 minutes, that's all you need.
Yeah. So then on 4/16, April the 16th, that's when Clemmy Schroeder came up to Waco.
Right.
And met with Henry. And we let her talk with him for a really long time. Henry was he was feeling pretty bad. He was coming off of Thorazine, and we didn't know it yet. I tried to get Clemmy to stay that night in Waco, but she wouldn't do it. She had promised Sheriff Boutwell, she would come back to Georgetown and tell
report
all about it.
Yeah, report in.
He did, and he recorded it and released some of it to the media, including that crazy preacher out of Colorado, I think, named Bob Larson. And they had this real personal interest in everybody believing that Henry was a serial killer, because here was this huge serial killer that had been brought to Jesus through the work of Sister Clemmy. And she was proud of that. And Bob Larson was proud of that. And if he suddenly was just a big liar, well, then their accomplishment wasn't so great in their eyes. I think any soul that's brought to Jesus, that's a good thing. Any lost sheep that's found, that's a good thing. Whatever it is, bring them into the fold. Let's love. Let's be inclusive. But they didn't see it that way. They really wanted Henry to be a mass murderer. She told me, and she also told Boutwell, and because I heard the tape later, she was trying to talk Henry out of recanting. She said, Henry, the newspapers are making you look bad. Henry, the newspapers are making you look like a jerk. TV is making you look like a jerk. You're never going to come out of this looking good. And so Henry was really conflicted. When we got him away from the task force, he wanted to tell the truth, yet he had so much pressure on him from Sister Clemmy, who now, I got to say, later came around. Once she saw what the truth was, she later came around.
Right.
But from Sister Clemmy and from Boutwell. So he waffled back and forth all the time with me and Maddox, planning to any day now take him in front of the grand jury, and us not even knowing for sure what Henry was going to say. Now, when I put Henry down behind a desk and I showed him what Hugh Ainsworth had been working on, all those dates, all those murders, his travel itinerary where we could prove where he was. He looked at that, and I remember him running his fingers up and down the dates and looking at them. And then he smiled with that old toothless grin and said, well, I was wondering when somebody's going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And it was almost like from that moment forward, he decided to even go against Sister Clemmy.
Yeah.
And tell her that he was going to tell the truth. In the meantime, I had been talking with Sister Clemmy a lot. She and I even prayed together in my office.
Cool.
She talked out well about that. And I got criticized big time for praying with Sister Clemmy. I was accused of trying to manipulate her and use her religion. But it really wasn't. All I was asking for was clarity. Because I didn't have to manipulate her. We had the truth.
Yeah.
The truth was going to come out. I remember back then I used to say to people, the truth doesn't always win in leaps and bounds. It has to saturate in slowly. You know, especially when you're going against entrenched beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
Set beliefs. Man, people were conditioned to believe in this boogeyman, Henry Lee Lucas. They wanted to believe in him. And we were conditioned to believe in the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, or at least that specific little task force of them.
Yeah, because at this point in history, the Texas Rangers were still a legend. Nobody criticized them and lived to talk about it.
Or would have gotten pistol whipped.
Yeah, yeah. Like Doug Swanson was telling us about.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to our interview with Doug Swanson, Cult of Glory. That book will be out in July.
Or June. I think it's June.
June. And you can pre-order it right now. Just Google Cult of Glory or Doug Swanson.
Mm-hmm.
Doug's a great writer. He's teaching right now up at the University of Pennsylvania.
Right. Yep.
Former writer with Dallas newspapers.
Right. Right.
He was a friend with Hugh Ainsworth.
Correct.
And Hugh's writing partners. All that happened between April 11th and April 16th. The afternoon of April 16th, Attorney General Maddox and I called a press conference and told the press what was going on, that we had Lucas and that we expected him to be testifying the next day.
Right.
And Jim Maddox said that we were looking into whether the local investigations were harmed by the task force. So that kind of threw the first, that fired the first shot across their bow.
Sure, sure.
We're looking into whether our local cases, our local investigation had been harmed by this disinformation that was being put out by the task force.
Yeah.
And then after that news conference on the 16th of April, that night was the night of the big brass meeting.
Right. We've talked about that in depth. Oh, God.
16th, yeah. So go back and listen to what we say about the big brass meeting. There appeared Colonel Jim Adams, Bob Prince, Boutwell, and even Jan Patterson, the assistant U.S. attorney who committed perjury in front of the federal grand jury. They got me indicted, committed all kinds of prosecutorial misconduct. And we'll be going into that in detail later and publishing our motion to dismiss. It's about an inch and a half thick.
Oh, God.
Barry Richardson and Jeff Kearney.
Some light reading.
Light reading. Most of it is very interesting. We have 8 or 10 affidavits on there from witnesses who tell about what Jan Patterson did to them and how she and some of the FBI agents threatened them.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting when we get down to that.
So was there someone with the FBI at the big brass meeting too?
Well, I think that Rampton was there. His name never has come out until the next day.
Mm-hmm.
All these names came from Clemmy Schroeder.
Okay.
The names that she remembered people being introduced to. But the big brass meeting went till nearly midnight on April the 16th. On April the 17th, the very next morning, Greg Rampton, and two other FBI agents show up at my office at 7 a.m. 7 a.m. demanding to see Lucas. Our chief deputy, Dan Weinberg, and our sheriff, Jack Harwell, said, no, we got to call the DA. They called me. I said, no, let's wait until the attorney general gets here.
Right.
I got there, and man, he hit the roof. He got mad, and I think I've mentioned before what he said about, is the president safe?
Yeah.
So they were wanting to talk to Henry Lucas before we took him to the grand jury. We were taking Henry to the grand jury that day on the 17th. When we wouldn't let them talk to Henry before, and all they were wanting to do is witness tamper.
Right.
It was a crime, but because of who they were, they could get away with it. But Maddox and I dug our heels in. We said, no, you're not going to see him. We'll let you talk to him all you want as soon as he's finished testifying before this grand jury.
Awesome.
And then they got in their car and left and didn't come back until the day they arrested me. Didn't come back to the courthouse until
nice.
A year and a half later. Yep. So they were there the very next morning. And also on April the 17th, that's the very first day that something showed up in the DPS files about me. April the 17th of 1985, in my DPS file was a memo from Ron Border where he tells about finding out on December the 19th of 1984 that we were investigating what the task force was doing with Henry Lee Lucas.
Right.
So there was no file on me, no paperwork, no nothing until that one memo which started the file on me on April the 17th, 1985. And in that memo, Ron Border, who was a DPS intelligence officer, tied directly to Colonel Jim Adams, answered to him. He was the one put in charge of framing me by Colonel Jim Adams right about this time. And in his own memo, he does not say anywhere, oh, and by the way, this is that guy we're investigating. This is that guy we think is taking kickbacks. This is that guy that's doing bribes. This is that guy that's going soft on this, that, and the other. This is that guy who's in bed with the drug dealers. None of that stuff that they accused me of later and then tried to say, oh no, we were investigating him way before he ever started looking at Henry Lucas. Well,
yeah.
No. And this memo on April 17th, 1985 is proof of that.
Agreed.
Maddox on 4/17/85 speaks to the press again. And he said, we want a full-scale investigation into all of the Lucas confessions. And he said he will try to meet with Texas Governor Mark White about it next week. So he wants an investigation. So the day before, he was saying, no, we're just looking to see if the task force interfered with these local investigations by disinformation.
Right.
Well, by the very next day, he said, nope, we're going to look off into all these Lucas confessions. Well, what happened to change his mind? Henry Lucas testified before the grand jury for a full day.
Right. And he did that on the 17th, right? That was the day Lucas was actually
17th and 18th. Yep. He testified 2 days. I think he testified for a full 8 hours the second day. Yeah.
Wow.
But he gave us enough information the first day that he convinced Maddox that we needed to look into all of the Lucas confessions. And it was on, and another thing that changed Maddox's mind is Lucas told me and Jim Maddox that it was Bob Prince, and he even dropped Clayton Smith in there. who I never have talked about very much, but he told us Clayton Smith had been feeding him information, and also Jim Boutwell. And we've played tapes, confession tapes, that show Jim Boutwell feeding him information.
Mm-hmm.
So then we got to April the 18th. So it's only been a week, Jonathan, from April 11th to April the 18th. A lot happened on the 17th. The 18th, I felt, God, finally a new day. Henry testified before the grand jury a second time, 8 solid hours. And Jim Maddox, when he came out of the meeting that day, he told the press, he says, I'm going to try to meet with Governor White next week. We need some money. There was some money in a judicial justice fund that was discretionary that he was going to ask for that could be used for judicial emergencies, involving seeking justice. And he also said that something he wanted to do was bring Otis Toole to Waco under subpoena.
Yeah, because he was still in Florida, right?
He was.
Okay.
I really wanted that. That's the only thing that Jim Maddox said we were going to do that we didn't get to do. Things got so crazy and we got under such attack that, and by then some of the other law enforcement agencies weren't so cooperative with us like they had been in the very beginning. Florida really shut down on us. You know, Florida even hid Frank Powell from us.
Right.
Becky's little brother.
That they said was in the car during a ton of these murders and whatnot.
Oh yeah, they
named it as being present.
Claimed that Becky and Frank were in the car when Rita Salazar was murdered.
Right.
By the way, in the future, as soon as we can get back in, we got Nifa Salazar lined up and ready to go.
Yes, Rita's sister.
Rita's sister. Yeah, and she's got a good story to tell.
Yes, she does.
Her emotions went through like a roller coaster ride for years over this thing. Losing her sister. Then finally thinking that the real killer had been caught, seeing him convicted. And then seeing all the doubt come up, you know, and her being all upset at me, all upset at Governor Bush. And then for it to totally turn around later when the real killer was found.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Using
DNA.
And now that they have that vacuum method you were talking about, man, it can go even faster and be even better. Which brings me back to Lily Heffley.
Yeah. Circle around on that.
So we never got to bring Otis Toole.
That's a shame because had you gotten that opportunity, I mean, I can imagine you putting them in 2 separate rooms. And I mean, their stories would have never synced up ever. So you would have been able to knock out a ton more murders just based on, you know, the differences in the you know, their confessions of certain cases. It would have just been so easy.
It would have. But you know, Jonathan, I don't think we'd have ever had to do that. I think if we'd have gotten Otis to Waco and he found out that Henry was saying, hey, let's stop this bullshit, let's tell the truth, I think Otis would have told the truth about it.
He would have flopped you.
Would have known where Otis was all of the time. You know, tell him what other information we could have dug up on Otis that would have corroborated all kinds of other exonerating information we had.
Crazy.
So on April the 17th, that's when Henry testified for 8 solid hours. And that's when Attorney General Maddox says, I'm going to ask Mark White, our governor, for $120,000 of this judicial money.
And that's to actually go and investigate some of these other claims that may have been out of state, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because by then we were already planning on getting witnesses to come in from out of state. One of them being Chris Piazza. He was on Netflix. He was the district attorney in Little Rock, Arkansas, who prosecuted Scotty Scott and got a conviction on Scotty Scott for that convenience store murder.
Right.
And then that conviction got reversed because in trots Bobby Prince with Henry Lucas, getting Henry to confess to it just because Scotty Scott was the son of an Arkansas state trooper.
Yep.
So Chris Piazza was not happy about that at all. And Chris Piazza is now a federal judge.
Right.
And he got special permission to be able to be on Netflix because federal judges usually are not interviewed for shows like that.
Yeah.
But this was a pretty important thing, and he wanted to do it. And so he was interviewed for Netflix as a sitting federal judge to tell about what happened when he was DA.
Crazy.
So anyway, we were getting all of those subpoenas out for people like Chris Piazza. And
You need the money to do it.
huh?
And you needed the funding to put it into
We needed
practice.
the funding. A lot of the people were willing to pay their own way. I think
Oh,
Chris
wow.
Piazza paid his own way because
Wow.
we couldn't have subpoenaed someone from Arkansas and had the subpoena stand up if he wanted to fight it. But we subpoenaed him as a courtesy, said he'd have the piece of paper, and he didn't fight it. And he really might have paid his own way. I don't recall because he was a very willing witness because he had seen a murderer walk free because of Bobby Prince and his little puppet called Henry Lucas.
His little puppet.
Yeah,
It's true, though.
we're
It's
all
true.
policemen. Yeah.
It's
So
totally
guess
true.
what else happened on the 18th?
I don't know what else.
On April the 18th, 1985, the very same day that Lucas testified for 8 hours, and Maddox comes out and says, wow, this is something I'm asking Mark White next week. I'm going to meet with White next week, and we're going to ask for $120,000 of this judicial money to finance this. Well, Governor Mark White, right about that time, is already calling his own press conference on the 18th, the very same day, Jonathan. And Governor Mark White holds a conference, and he says the local jurisdictions should assess the validity of their own Lucas cases, and it should be financed by the local jurisdiction, not by any state funds.
Boom. Shot it down immediately.
Yeah, so that's just kind of a backhanded way of saying, screw you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say.
He jerked the rug out from under us before Maddox could even get back to Austin.
Yeah.
So not only did he say no, he said no real fast, and he said no real stern, no state financing. It's going to be the locals. Well, how many local jurisdictions do you think would have opened a Lucas case back then?
Probably none, or slim to none. I would say slim to none.
Yeah. There was none. None in Texas because by then everybody saw saw the storm clouds gathering against me.
Yeah. They didn't want any part of that. Plus, I mean, I don't know what the cost is to reopen a case like this. Because obviously the cases being presented to Lucas were cold cases. So I don't know what the cost is to reopen one to actually reinvestigate it.
Well, financially for each jurisdiction, it probably wouldn't have been that much. But the emotional cost, the political cost, the peace of mind cost, because no other DA was going to do it. No other DA. That's why Cappy Eads, the DA of Bell County, made me come down and visit with him when all this got started.
I can't be friends with you no more, Vic.
That's what he said to me. Made me wait for an hour just to tell me he couldn't be friends with me anymore.
Crazy.
And he had spoken at my appreciation dinner just the year before, 6 months before.
Wow.
He had been a guest speaker at my appreciation dinner. Pictures of us shaking hands, hugging. And then he says, I can't be your friend anymore because you violated the law enforcement. Here's what he said. Right or wrong.
Yeah.
Right or wrong. You should not have done it. We're no longer friends. Those are the last words I ever heard from him.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
That's really a shame.
Yeah. And he never got to see Netflix because he died before Netflix came out. Man, a lot of these guys are dead.
Yeah. So what else happened that day? So Mark White shot down your request for funds.
Shot down our request for funds, and then the grand jury came back in the next day on April the 19th. We're still in April, man. And they convened and decided to recess until May 3rd. That's because we had all these subpoenas going out. We had all these documents coming in. We had Mike Ferry out on the road interviewing Lucas's family members. And
Right.
we've played some of those tapes, I think. If not, maybe we can,
I don't think we have yet, but we will.
we will. Because we've got interviews with people that Lucas lived with, that knew him, his
Yeah,
wife,
his wife.
other relatives, men that he worked with. He had a totally different opinion of him, and who placed him there
Yeah.
during a lot of these murders. So anyway, the grand jury recessed for 2 weeks. And let me tell you, Jonathan, a lot can happen in 2 weeks.
Not gonna happen in a day.
A lot can happen in 2 weeks, especially those 2 weeks in April. Because with the grand jury not sitting, with the grand jury not hearing evidence, that's when Jim Adams, director of the state police in Texas, former associate director of the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, former director of the domestic spy program of the FBI, who kept 6.5 million files, and that's just what he would admit to,
Yeah, really.
on American citizens, you know? And we've talked before about some of the court cases now who say that they're saying it's all right for police to use excessive force. It's just okay. And even if you're complying,
Yeah.
then we have William Barr, who's trying to take it a step further and say, if a federal agent or a law enforcement agent kills someone, kills an American citizen, they should have immunity for that.
Yeah.
I don't understand that kind of thinking. I
I
just
don't
don't.
either, Vic.
He fought really hard uh, for that sniper who killed the lady holding the baby at Ruby Ridge.
Right.
She made no provocative movements. He just murdered her. And then along comes William Barr trying to get immunity for him, which they never had to go that far because they ran somebody against the DA who had indicted this sniper and beat him. And then the guy that beat him dropped the charges.
Just dropped it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's like they ran two people against me, one in
Right,
the
right.
Democratic primary and a Republican in the general election.
Hmm.
So I had to go through two races that year, plus deal with all of this.
And a lot on your plate.
It's incredible. So on 4/19/1985, it was the same day that our grand jury said, "Nah, we'll be back in May." Greg Rampton, Special Agent Greg Rampton interviewed Sister Clemmy Schroeder about her visit with Lucas
Interesting.
a couple of days previous. Now, she had already met with Boutwell. She had told Boutwell everything. Boutwell hooks her up with Greg Rampton. She basically tells Greg Rampton everything that she told Boutwell.
Right.
And that was just that Henry was confused. Uh, he didn't want to tell the truth to Clemmy because he knew that would make her think less of him.
Right,
Oh
right.
my
He was a
God.
people pleaser.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not a serial killer, Clemmy. I'm so sorry I'm not a killer. When she and everybody else wanted him to be this killer that
Oh,
thought
yeah.
Jesus, you know?
Wanted the monster.
So so she talks to FBI agent Greg Rampton. I don't know what time of the day that was, but on that same day, April 19th, 1985, U.S. District Judge Edward Prado signs a warrant at the request of Attorney General of U.S. Attorney Helen Eversberg. Eversberg was Jan Patterson's boss.
Right.
She's the one, and we'll find the video of this. If we don't put it with this interview, we'll put it somewhere soon. It's Helen Eversberg handing out copies of my
Oh,
indictment.
I remember this.
I was
Yeah.
arrested. She looked like a hostess at a party, handing out party favors. Oh, here, have a copy. Oh, here, did you get your copy yet? Oh,
Yeah.
here, please take one. It's the silliest thing I ever saw.
But it's funny too, because I remember the reporter's like, "Well, what does it say? What are the charges being brought?" She's like, "It speaks for itself. It speaks for itself."
And no, it didn't. So, Greg Rampton interviews Clemmy. Then it goes from Rampton to Eversberg, taking a motion and order to a federal judge, and he signs this order. And guess what the order said?
What does it say?
It was ordering me and Maddox to release Henry Lucas from McLennan County and for Henry to appear before a U.S. grand jury in San Antonio,
Right.
April the 24th.
And this is for the civil rights violation, right?
So
Gotcha.
this order was signed on the 19th for him to appear on the 24th. Well, that's 5 days later. Where was he going to be during that 5 days?
With you? With the Rangers?
They've just ordered me and Maddox to release him
Like an immediate release?
right then.
Oh
Right
wow, yep.
then.
Time to go back with the Rangers.
And keep in mind, this was before cell phones.
Right.
This was before fax machines. Everything had to be done in person. So Greg Rampton interviews Clemmy Schroeder. He didn't get to email that interview to Helen Eversberg. He had to get her to sign it. He had to drive it to her. They had to sit down and look at it. She had somebody draft a motion, draft an order. They had to go to San Antonio, which is another 60 miles south of Austin.
Why San Antonio? They
Uh,
think it was just an unbiased area?
no, that's where Judge Prado sat, and he was like
Oh,
maybe the presiding judge. We're in the Western District of Texas federally, and San Antonio is the main hub for it. The
gotcha.
main offices are there, and then you have some courts in Austin and the one up here in Waco.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So no faxes, no email. So that same day, Judge Prado is signing an order saying that me and Maddox have to release him. So what do you think happened?
Well, I think you had to release him, Vic. I think the Rangers rolled up like we've talked about in the past, and they snatched him away. Back under the influence.
It was the federal U.S. Marshals that showed up on that same day. So we got Rampton talking to Schroeder. We got Rampton talking to Eversberg. We got Eversberg talking to Judge Prado. We got Judge Prado talking to the U.S. Marshals. And then we got the U.S. Marshals making it all the way to Waco, still on the 19th. And they say, release Henry Lucas to us.
And we got the paperwork.
There it is. Fortunately, Maddox was still at the courthouse. I'd have done the same thing even if he hadn't been there, but we both said no. We stood in the door like we were blocking the door to the jail in an Old West movie, and we said
Wow.
no. And we had the support of Jack Harwell, Sheriff Harwell, one of the greatest men to ever live, and Chief Deputy Dan Weinberg, also one of the greatest men to ever live. Such respect for those guys. You always hear they don't make guys like that anymore, and that's just sort of a saying, but they really don't make guys like them anymore.
That's pretty cool.
And we stood those guys down. We stood them down. They left. And then Maddox got on the phone with his people in Austin, and we filed an immediate appeal to the Fifth Circuit.
Cool.
Said, please stop this. So we got our appeal filed, and it took 20 minutes, maybe, and they denied our appeal. Bam!
Wow.
Like, wow. Now there's either we were so totally damn wrong, and I know we weren't. History has proven we weren't.
Right.
Or there are some big powers at play behind the scenes.
Yeah, which we obviously know.
Which we know.
That there were.
Which we know. This is in sworn testimony, either in my criminal trial or in Belo. I think in Belo when I sued Channel 8.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and after a while, the slimy trail of the serpent became more visible, and it led right back to the desk of Colonel Jim Adams.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here. And our appeal was denied about 5 minutes later, 15 minutes later. And so then we appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And that bought us a few more days. They wouldn't take it up. They're not going to take up stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that bought us a few more days. And then on the 25th, I think that was the day of the grand jury down in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
24th. Then on the 24th, the U.S. Marshals came back and we let him go because they were driving him straight to San Antonio. We didn't know if we were going to get him back or if he was going to end up back in Georgetown with Boutwell twisting his arm, making him confess some more. So we had no idea what was going on. So in Netflix, you see Sheriff Jack Harwell get in a car with Henry Lucas, another man get in, and they're identified as Sheriff Harwell and Weinberg. Well, it wasn't. That was them getting in the car to take Henry to San Antonio, and that was Parnell McNamara, who is now the sheriff of McLennan County. He was a U.S. Marshal back then, and that was him that they showed, not Deputy Weinberg. And they drove him to San Antonio. At the same time, Jim Maddox and I caught the Attorney General's plane in Waco, and we flew to San Antonio.
Right. Let me ask you this, Vic. The whole time this was going on, were you guys talking to Lucas at all, letting him know what was going on? Like, hey, they're trying to get you back now, but here's what we're going to do to try to prevent it. Was there a constant contact with Lucas to see what he wanted to see, like let him know what was happening, getting any feedback from him? Like, they're going to try to get me. Here's what you guys need to do. Was there anything, or just kind of let him just chill in the jail and just
no, we let him know. We didn't keep constant contact with him, but we did let him know what was going on. I was kind of the key contact with Henry. Deputy Weinberg would bring him up to the DA's office, and Henry and I would meet in the DA's office library, in the law library.
Yeah.
And I would keep Henry informed of what was going on, what was to be expected next. I let him know that they were going to take him and they might keep him, and we might not get him back. I had no idea what that grand jury down there would be asking him.
Right.
I'm not sure when we found out that we were being accused of violating Henry's civil rights. That's what that grand jury was about.
Right.
Greg Rampton wrote up this thing, and Helen Eversberg wrote it up saying that we were violating Henry's civil rights based upon the interview that Rampton did with Sister Clemmy. And so we just said, go down there and whatever they ask you, just tell the truth and we'll see what happens, and we hope they'll give you back.
Right.
This was the airplane trip I told about once before, when right over Austin, the plane caught fire.
Yeah.
The smoke. We didn't know what we were going to do. And the pilot says, we're pretty close to San Antonio. And it was just a little electrical fire. It went out, but it did fill the cabin up with smoke.
Great.
It had a little drama to it.
Yeah, I'd say.
So we landed.
God.
We picked up in a car, taken to the federal courthouse. I got ready to go inside, and they stopped me at the door. They wouldn't let us in.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let me in or Jim Maddox.
Jeez.
State Attorney General, they wouldn't let us in the front door. Guy Cox had come down. Guy Cox had been appointed to be Henry's lawyer by Judge George Allen. They wouldn't let Guy Cox come in. Now they're accusing us of violating Henry's civil rights.
They're keeping his lawyer outside. Awesome.
They're keeping his lawyer outside. Yes, that's standard operating procedure for that task force. They're always keeping Henry away from his lawyers.
God.
So we didn't know what he was going to say, but Guy and I were talking on the parking lot with Maddox, and saying, well, it's just hard to believe we're standing here and our future, our freedom depends on what that one-eyed drifter up in that grand jury is saying right now. And God knows
Crazy.
how we're reading it, you know?
Crazy.
So, but as it turned out, Henry told the truth. He
Right.
said, they're the first people who cared about my rights. He told them that Boutwell and Prince had been feeding him information, which was not something Helen Eversberg or Jan Patterson wanted to hear.
Of course not.
But whatever happened in that grand jury room, when it was over, the judge ordered that Henry be put back in the car with Jack Harwell, and he was driven back to Waco. And we had him for the duration of the grand jury. Although
Right.
they did stop our grand jury before we were finished.
Right. And I think we talked about that before. Like you tried to get it extended and it just wasn't happening.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Vic Feazell. During these trying times, you might want to just stay home. And at the law offices of Vic Feazell, we understand. That's why we're set up to handle your personal injury claim without you even having to come in. Just give us a call, and we'll take it from there. We can send any paperwork straight to your smartphone or computer. Don't delay, because if we don't put money in your pocket, you don't owe us anything. I'm Vic Feazell.